Let's do a quick exercise. Think back on any debate you might have seen in the past, be it with a family member online, a heated debate on a message board, or even in the comments section of a video like the one you're watching right now. Whenever there is a polarizing debate, it seems like it's nearly impossible to change anyone's mind on the subject, no matter the explanations or justifications that might be provided. What if this was because the means of communication, from the internet to our own everyday conversations, is under a system of tyranny, oppressing the ways we communicate with others? This is an extremely real problem, though this means of tyranny takes a different form than one might expect. Today I'm going to talk about the means of how we communicate in our modern world of instant communication and social media. Despite the fact that we are now exposed to a wider set of cultural backgrounds, personal philosophies, and ideas, it feels a lot harder to find common ground in our discussions. Though, why is this? One of the more complicated aspects of any form of communication is ironically matters that deal in ideas considered unalienable truths.
It was a curious kind of narcissism, a view of every individual as creating his own mind and personality from scratch in his own lifetime. None of this sense that we are the inheritors and transmitters of traditions, that our world is shaped for us by the things that we grow up into and which we internalize and make our own.
This is Stephen Toulmin, a philosopher and rhetorician who greatly discussed the processes of arguments. Many people know of him today because of the structures of argument that he put forth, though one of his other major contributions to the fields of rhetoric and philosophy were his views surrounding the concepts of absolutism and relativism, being a firm rejecter of both of these concepts. He believed that the reliance on these principles, be it in both the absolute and relative sense, were not conducive or practical to any ethical or philosophical dilemmas you might face in the real world, going so far as to consider that the reliance on principle is a form of tyranny, him once stating how the subsequent reassertion of ethical objectivity has led in turn to an insistence of absoluteness in moral principle that is not balanced by a feeling for the complex problems of discrimination that arise when such principles are applied to the particular real life. Though how do these subsequent beliefs apply to online communication? And why have such extreme ideals become commonplace? I believe that this is partially attributed to the way the internet is designed. Quite often, the most provocative, controversial, and absolutist ideas are the ones that get the most attention and exposure. This has been a constant that has only been enhanced with the introduction of the internet. Many people find themselves receiving attention and validation when they are reinforcing certain ideals and help confirming certain biases. And because the internet is divided into somewhat insular communities like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Tumblr, 4chan, this reinforcement only is compounded by the people staying within these communities and making these communities unwelcoming to outside perspectives. This causes websites to begin to adopt certain values and principles that best address the website's audience, while at the same time trying to reinforce the most vocal and prominent voices within that website's community. This is comparable to what Toulmin observed within religious institutions and Nazi-occupied Germany, in which a reliance on principles and ideals has led to conflicting opinions on issues to boil down to simple headbutting, where no solution can be easily found. One of the best examples of this is within one of the continuingly controversial debates that occur online almost every day, debates surrounding gender issues and gender equality. When it comes to questions surrounding gender equality, most people would agree that everyone should be treated with some equal level of respect, though it becomes a lot messier when it comes to the personal backgrounds and principles of various online communities. For example, websites like Tumblr tend to have an audience primarily consisting of lower class, LGBTQ+, younger female users. As a result, much of the website's community principles centers on ideals of inclusivity and diversity, where many identify strongly with the principles of feminism and will often make the call for more gender diversity and equality into the world, to the point of being considered too aggressive in their efforts of change. On the opposite end of the spectrum, websites like 4chan are presumed to be primarily made up of men, and white heterosexual middle-class cisgendered men at that. This causes the website to accommodate this perspective primarily, which has resulted in a wide underbelly of racism and misogyny within the community. Likewise, both of these websites have become quite intertwined with their core principles, Tumblr being about ordered inclusivity, whereas 4chan is about unfiltered chaos. Even if this doesn't fully define the users of this website, or even how the website behaves as a whole, it has become the defining principle to the members in the community, whether they want it or not. So whenever large-scale issues surrounding gender may arise on the internet, two sides of the argument being characterized by these two websites will often clash on these issues to extreme results. People on the Tumblr side, staying true to the principles of ordered inclusivity, will passionately advocate for change and reform, to the point of giving flawed but well-meaning arguments, whereas the people of 4chan, characterized by unfiltered chaos, will refute these arguments by pointing out the flaws in their arguments and using it as evidence to completely discount their concerns. Though because both of these communities are so closely adhering to their principles, there is no common ground established within the issue. Instead, it devolves into attacks and anger towards these communities on the basis of the perceptions of these communities, rather than any merit of their arguments, where Tumblr users are generally characterized as being sensitive SJWs, whereas 4chan seems to be made up as angry misogynists. So while these characterizations might hold merit on a small level, it is at this point that Toulmin would state that this debate has become less temperate, less discriminating, and above all, less resolvable. As a result, this leads the online spaces to become more toxic and negative to those on the outside, and it makes approaching such debates with more increasing difficulty. And because of the strict adherence to the principles established and reinforced by both the websites and the users, any arguments and perspectives risking becoming absorbed by these characterizing principles, which ultimately weakens such arguments. Now, this is not me saying that everyone needs to abandon the concept of principles and adopt a relativistic worldview. In fact, Toulmin would argue strongly against the prospect. While he believed that absolutism lead to an uncompromising worldview, relativism lacks a certain moral center within its ideologies, which can lead to an equally uncompromising worldview. If we are to be freed from ideals of tyrannizing images, Toulmin would suggest to examine any dilemma, be it ethics, politics, religion, or even surrounding a piece of art you might enjoy. It is important to look at these arguments critically and examine the areas that can be compromised on. And though while it has become simpler and somewhat encouraged to dismiss some arguments out of principle, it becomes greatly harmful to our broader perspective of the world if we become too reliant on these ideals. So while it may be impossible to completely fix the problems surrounding tyranny of absolutes, do I think it can be improved through compromise and critical thinking? Absolutely.